we had the opportunity to start with Revelation chapter 5. Revelation chapter 5 is one of the most incredible chapters in the entire Bible because it is that chapter where the world, the angelic host, is asking the question, who is worthy to even tell the story of what planet Earth is like? Who is worthy to actually be able to stand up and say, I was there, I experienced it, I know. There was a scroll with 7 seals, and that scroll was handed over to one person, only one in all the universe, in all time and history, who could actually say, I can tell the story. I know every name of every person. I know every date when they were born and when they ceased. I can tell the story, and that, my friend, is our Savior, Jesus Christ. And he began the story then by telling us about this Adam and Eve, our forefathers, our family line, our family tree, where every one of us came from. He began telling the story about the garden and what happened in that garden. In the midst of the garden, there was a tree. And that tree was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Adam and Eve were placed in that garden on a probation time. And the question was, are you going to listen and follow what God has told us about that tree? Or are you going to listen to the enemy, the dragon, the father of lies, these titles that Satan owns? He has deserved them, he has worked for them, and those are his titles. And the father of lie took an opportunity, and he told the woman, have a bite of the apple. I know God said if you eat of it, you will surely die, but I'm here to tell you that's not true. And the lie went through, and Eve believed. She took it to Adam. He believed. They ate of the apple, and they had just lost everything that God had so graciously given. It takes us to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And once they partook of that tree, God said, I've got to protect the rest of mankind. If they now go and they eat from the tree of life, that sin will continue forever. It will be locked in. And angels were immediately sent to guard the tree of life. Adam and Eve then had to leave the garden home. And when they left the garden home, they left hopeless. And my friends, I just take a moment and imagine. I've lived in the same house for 30 years. That house has memories. I brought babies home from the hospital and raised them in that home. I know every corner of that home, and I know where the dust gathers most. Adam and Eve knew every corner of this garden. They had been given the opportunity to name every single animal. They watched God complete creation that he had started. And now, because they believed a lie, they distrusted God, and they were no longer could live in the garden home. They were helpless. They were desperate for the gospel's restoration of the image of God. Now, you and I, if it were me and I was leaving home, I'm going to be concerned about water. I'm going to be concerned about food and shelter. I'm going to be concerned about communication, not Adam and Eve. No, what they were concerned about, what they were most desperate for, how can I be restored back to where I was? God said, let us make man in our own image, according to our own likeness. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. And this is what they so desperately longed for. there was a problem. The problem is that sin had separated them from God. Sin separated them just like sin separates us. The Jewish law had a way that if a man lost all that he had and he could not pay his debt, then his creditor could take him as his slave. Adam and Eve were the first POWs of planet Earth. Our earth became a concentration camp. And you and I, we serve in it today. And you and I, we're prisoners of wars as well. But you know what? We've just become so used to it, it doesn't affect us like it should. We are in a concentration camp. And there's a way out. So with the way that this worked is if the next of kin came along, this is in the Jewish laws, this is in the language of the book of Revelation. If the next of kin came along, they had to be a relative, a blood relative. They could pay the redemption price. And that person would be restored to full citizenship again and no longer a slave. With ransom in hand, our next of kin, who was Jesus Christ, came along and he paid the price. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. And there is one Savior. And that Savior is Jesus Christ. Okay. What Adam lost, Christ. What mankind lost in the Garden of Eden, Christ said, I can restore that, and I have restored that for you. As we open the book of Revelation, it is a book of symbols. And it's really important that we understand what a book of symbols looks like. We understand that symbols are used around the world in many ways today. Our money has symbols on it. Legal documents have symbols. There are symbols that surround us, and there are symbols in the book of Revelation that God has given us the insight to understand if we will just search. Symbolism in its religious application means that an object, an animal, an action, form, or words, or whatever else is involved has a deeper spiritual meaning than a simple literal interpretation might suggest. The book of Revelation holds symbols. Sometimes it's a double imagery. A symbol can mean something natural and it can mean something spiritual. A symbol can be in numbers. A symbol can be in colors. This is the language that God is speaking to people who really want to understand. Symbols are found in the names of people. Symbols are found in the names of cities. And symbols are found in actions. And that's what makes the book of Revelation exciting. We can open that book and we can understand those symbols and we can hear clearly the message that God has for this last generation on earth. We can open the book and we can understand what the last 14 days in Earth's history will be like. What will be happening in heaven, what will be happening on earth, what will be happening with the people of God, and what will be happening with the people who know not God. Jesus used many symbols in the Bible. When he resurrected Lazarus, he went, the symbol there, the message he was given is, I am the life and the resurrection. When he healed the blind man, what he wanted to say to the world is, I am the life of the world. When he fed the 5,000, the message he was giving to us today is, I'm your bread of life. I can feed you like no one else can feed you because I know what you need. But we will not be able to identify the symbols when we walk into the book of Revelation. We want to let the Bible be its own interpreter. We want to investigate the context of symbols. We want to check other passages with the Bible. And we want to understand what Jesus was saying to John on the island of Patmos. And he said, I have spoken. by my prophets and have multiplied visions. I have given symbols through the witness of the We always want the Bible to be explained according to its obvious meaning, unless a symbol or figure is employed. And this is just really important to understand as we open the book of symbols back to our hopeless couple. Adam and Eve longed to be restored. And I don't know about you, but I have that same longing. I really do. I look around at the world. I see what happened this past week with the hatred that is spewed from our Capitol building. I look around and I just say, God, restore us. Restore us. I think about I'm needing a little more sleep. I was sick for like a whole week. I'm needing a little more sleep. I'm like, just restore. And that's the desperate plea of Adam and Eve. I want to tell you what. When the heart is ready, God does not delay. And if you're here today, and if you're thinking, I want to be restored. I want to be transformed into the image of God. I want my health back. I want my identity back. I long for that. If you're here for that purpose today, the book of Revelation has a message for you. And this is the same message it has for Adam and Eve. As soon as the heart is ready, God sends the message. I saw an angel flying in the midst of heaven having the everlasting gospel. The everlasting gospel. All we need to do is identify what the everlasting gospel is, and we know how God restored Adam and Eve. All we need to do is identify what the everlasting gospel is, and we know how God can restore human beings. Because that gospel was not just for one time or one person. That gospel was to go into every nation, every tribe, every tongue, and every people, because God does not have favorites. All lives matter. And we may think it's something new on CNN or Fox News, but it's not new for God. The book of Revelation told us right at the beginning, every nation, every tongue, every tribe, every people, I have come to give my life for them. And that, my friend, is the everlasting gospel. Christ's sacrifice is complete and eternal. There is nothing more that is needed, period, end of story. The everlasting gospel. The everlasting gospel that gives us the message that tells us by his stripes we are healed. By his stripes we are healed. The power that comes to you and I to be restored, to be healed from whatever messiness is going on in our life is right here in the book of Revelation. It's in the book of Revelation. Because if we know prophecy, and if we can give dates, and if we can give times, and if we can give names of great people that have come and gone throughout history, but we know not God, and we know not what happened at the cross, and what he has given us to restore us, and we waste it. Jesus himself said, I've come to preach the gospel to the poor. Those who don't know the gospel, those who don't know about salvation. I've come to let them know I am that living message. Jesus says, I've come to heal the brokenhearted. Now look, if you've ever had your heart broken, it's happened to me a couple times. Every time my child walks away from home to go to their own home, my heart is broken. When they walk down the aisle to say I do to someone, I ask the question, why do we ever teach them how to walk? Had they continued to crawl, we wouldn't be having this wedding. I wouldn't be saying goodbye. Bittersweet. But have you ever been abandoned? This message is for you. If you've ever been blind to what someone said, whether it was Hollywood or a person, if you've ever been blind, this message is for you because he came to recover and restore sight. And if you're feeling oppressed, if you're feeling pushed down, if you're feeling unimportant, if you're feeling like you don't really matter, this message of revelation, because that's what Jesus came to do. And when it's really going to matter, it matters today, but the last 14 days of Earth's history, it will matter more to you than gold and silver. It will matter more to you than anything you've ever done in your life. So the last 14 are critical. And the angel continues saying with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come. God was so patient with the people during Noah's time. For 120 years, he stood by and he watched his servant Noah plead with people, come into the ark. When the door closes, there's nothing more I can do for you. But right now, come into the ark so you can have life. God was so patient with Sodom and Gomorrah. He warned and he warned. A judgment day is coming. He was lingered as long as he could. And today, God is patient with you and I. And even though he is patient, the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, their time ran out. The people living at the time of Noah, their time lived out. The people living at the time of the end, time will run out. And when time runs out, that's when you want to have your hand in the hand of your Savior. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city. Babylon? That took place thousands of years ago. What are we talking about? Remember, we stated that a symbol can be both real, natural, and it can also be a symbol of something that it represents. And that's exactly what we have with this symbol. Babylon 1 and 2. There was a Babylon that existed, and I can hardly wait for episode 3 of this presentation because we're going to go into deep details of Babylon. But today we're going to go over it. Next week, we're going to go into the depth of it. Babylon 1 has fallen, and Babylon 2 has fallen according to our message in Revelation. But I got to tell you, in the book of Revelation, it refers to Babylon many times. And I'm going to hit those 3 key times right now. We just did one found in Revelation 14. Let's go over. Why did she fall? Because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Let's drop in these symbols and see what that really was saying. The symbols that we want to identify here are wine and fornication. What is the Bible talking about here? Well, the wine that the Bible is referring to in the book of Revelation is false doctrines and teachings. Jesus says, I'm coming back for my bride. He didn't say, I'm coming back for my groom. I'm coming back for my bride. Because Jesus happens to think marriage is a sacred bond between a man and a woman. First, the natural. The spiritual is Jesus is coming back to take his bride. And when we sit at that banquet table in the New Jerusalem, that is the reception hall of the great wedding. And it is at that time that no one, no man, no dragon, no beast, no one will ever separate Jesus from his church, the bride, again. Will never happen again. In the meantime, you and I have decisions to make. And the wine that is being distributed throughout our world right now is a wine of false doctrines. It takes a little bit of what's real and mixes what is not true. And those who drink it and drink it, they can become drunk on it, so drunk that they're no longer thinking clearly of what the message is that God is actually giving. The fornication, that is the symbol in Revelation, that is an illicit relationship between the church and the world. We can't have it both. We cannot follow God and follow man both. The ways of God are pure. The ways of man are so much tradition. Following God and God only is what he's asking us to do. Babylon is talked about, continues in the book in chapter 17. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman who sat upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. I want to go into this deeper and deeper as we move forward with this project. Right now, I just want to identify one of the symbols, and that symbol is a beast. The beast power that is spoken of in the book of Revelation is a political power. And this political power will play out its cards extremely well during those last 14 days of Earth's history. It is very important for you and I to understand what's in those 14 days, and here's why. Number one, it's going to give you security as the world is just falling apart, as mountains are moved out of their place, as oceans have expanded, as buildings come down, governments rise and fall. The people of God have an increase. Because God says, his promise is, I will do nothing unless I reveal it to my people first. God's people have a way out. We have a way out. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. The symbol here that I want to talk about is what a woman represents in the book of Revelation. We're going to find 2 women in Revelation. 2 women. And today we're talking about this woman. But I got to tell you, there's another woman, and she's coming along. But this woman right here, she represents the church, the fallen church. And when she says arrayed with all the gold and the precious stones and the pearls, I have so many friends that look at me and say, Donna, why don't you have holes in your ears? I don't have holes in my ears because God didn't make me with holes in my ears. I have so many friends that say, Donna, just a light little string of pearls would look great on that dress. And I want to tell you, this is my response. I don't need the fake stuff. I want the real stuff. I'm going for the crown. I'm not going for the cheap stuff that dangles and twists right now. I'm going for the crown. And whatever God puts on that crown is going to be good with me, whatever it is. The woman that represents the false church in Revelation is a woman that is into herself instead of into the gospel message. She is a woman that says, I can do it all on my own. She is a church that says, I can make up my own salvation. She is a church that says, I can forgive sins because I am as though the Almighty. She is a church that says, what the scripture says, I can rewrite to say what I want to say. And she decks herself out. And it seduces so many people. And I can tell you the church that God has in mind is different. Very different. That's all I'm looking for. Is this one right here? And this crown is available all today. Folks, we're on salvation. God is asking the question, not so much are we asking God, who are you? God's asking, who are you? Can I trust you in my kingdom? Can I trust you to partake of the tree of life? Can I trust you? And this probation time is a time for us to sort out all of the questions in our mind. When he says, by his stripes we are healed. We are healed so we can make choices of what church we are going to belong to. Because when the last 14 days come, that's what's going to matter the most. And upon her forehead, there was a name written, and it said, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Babylon. What is this abominations we're talking about? Revelation makes it very clear that that's part of the false church. So let's see what the Bible has to say about abominations. Turn up to John 10, 31, 33. Jesus is in the court. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, the scribes, the rulers, the rabbis are all standing around. And guess what? They're about ready to stone him. This is Jesus, the Son of God, the Redeemer of the world. They're about to stone him. And Jesus answered them, Many works I have shown you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me? And the Jews answered him and saying, For good work? No, we do not stone you for that. You can keep doing all the miracles you want to do. But for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God. If you want to know what blasphemy is, what Revelation is talking about, when it gives us this woman here that represents Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations, blasphemy is those who say they are God and they are not God. The world has so many gods. So many gods. But there is only one true God. And the book of Revelation explains that to us. The last verse in Revelation that pertains to Babylon, I wanted to bring to your attention. Revelation 18, and he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth, they've committed fornication with her. And the merchants, the merchants of the earth, that's those who are selling the gospel message that isn't a real message. That's those who are selling doctrine that isn't really doctrine. The merchants of the earth are those who are pretending to know God and they don't know God. They're waxed rich through the abundance of their delicacies. What glitters is not always gold. Eve and Adam found that out. What glitters is not always gold. And that is a lesson for you and I today as well. The last call continues. And worship him who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and the springs of living water. That's the last call. That's the cry, the heart cry of all of heaven. Know who you are worshiping. For he alone receives the glory and honor and power, for he created all things. And by him they exist. He is the creator. And if there's something I would love for you to hear from the book of Revelation on this, our second episode, it is this. Number one, by his stripes we are healed. 2, he is our creator, and he deserves our worship. He and he alone. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, Babylon. Come out of Babylon. Come out of confusion, my people. That you be not partakers of her sin, and that you receive not her plagues. We will be talking about the plagues. And I want to say this in advance. The plagues are one of the greatest messages we have today. It is exciting to know how God is going to be taking care of his people during those times. It is exciting to know truth instead of the fear that so many people connect with it. The plagues are a time when we get to see God at work in a mighty way. Next week, we're going to talk about the other woman. And I can hardly wait for this to come, because the other woman will take us through the last 14 days. Father, you continue to fill our souls, and we are grateful. We know, Lord, that there are many enticements and lies and complications in our world. But when we come to you, everything is so clear. Everything is so calm, and everything is so peaceful, and we know what our next steps are. So, Father, as we leave this place, I pray that each of us will take a step, that you will find us in your word like never before, that we will long to understand what the last 14 days of this earth's history will really be like, and that we will embrace it. I pray this in the holy name. Thank you in advance for filling out your surveys. They are very helpful to us as we look at what improvements we need to make, what areas you would like to see more emphasis on, maybe some areas that were too strong. We'd really like to know. Be sure to hand them to Tracy on your way out. And thank you again for being here. God bless.